Welcome to Bucs Insider, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and I don't know if you can tell, but we're into Creamsicle this week. We have a lot of orange happening on our set right now. I love the sweatshirt. Looks great.
Got orange underneath too.
Yeah, it's orange through and through. Man, I mean, I don't know if anyone out there doesn't know yet that the Creamsicle game is this Sunday.
I think I know.
I think everybody knows at this point. We have just blanketed Tampa Bay with knowledge of this. I think everyone is so excited. I mean, I can't remember a time for a game that wasn't the Super Bowl where I felt this much excitement for something that wasn't just about the football matchup, that was something going on with the team, with the stadium, with the city. Oh, look, this is one of my favorite things. Mike just cruising in the Creamsicle helmet. Everyone is so excited about this. The guys are hype about the jerseys. This isn't even just a fan thing. The team is excited. We've gotten to see them practicing in the helmets this week, get a little bit of a taste of that. So yeah, I'm thrilled. I've never gotten to watch it before. You've been here long enough that you've seen the OG Creamsicle jerseys.
And the throwbacks.
And the throwbacks. You've witnessed all of it. So for you, what stands out about what this means to the city, this franchise?
I actually pulled out a t-shirt from the 90s yesterday, and everybody thought it was like a new throwback. I'm like, no, this is Russell
This
Athletic.
is the OG that I've kept long enough.
It's been over a decade since the Buccaneers have worn the orange, and they did the throwback games from 2009 to 2012, and they were extremely popular. But then they had that new helmet rule in the NFL where you couldn't have more than one helmet. So we weren't able to do it for around a decade. So to bring them back now, I just think everybody's really excited about it. And it's really funny how, in '97, there was a lot of excitement about the switch of uniforms. People really liked the new uniforms a lot, and they still do. But now how it's become such a nostalgic thing, this orange. And I think it's just because it's so iconic. You don't see a lot of this in sports.
That's very true. I remember when I first started here in 2015, and we'd be taking questions for our shows, and every show it was, when are they bringing it back? And I remember when I first started seeing this, I'm like, what is the deal? And then I very quickly caught on.
It is surprising how popular it is.
It is. It's very exciting. I can't wait for it. Hope to see all of you guys rocking your Creamsicle, whether you're at the game, watching from home. It's going to be a blast. And this is also a great matchup to go along with it. We know that part of why they picked it was because the Lions were in the division when they were wearing the Creamsicle. But now these two teams facing off has, even though they're not in the same division, still some pretty big implications in terms of where each team is at record-wise at this point.
It's the only game on the NFL's Week 6 slate that features two teams in first place from separate divisions. It's the only game on the slate with two teams that have one or fewer losses. And really, to me, what it means to the NFL's at large is, I think everybody would probably say at this point that the 5-0 49ers and the 5-0 Eagles are at the top of the hierarchy in the NFC. Who's next? I mean, maybe it was Dallas, but they didn't fare very well in San Francisco. Detroit and Tampa kind of sitting there looking to fill in that role, and whichever one wins this game, you could legitimately say, hey, maybe they're,
in that top tier.
They're the next one that's threatening that top tier, and they are legitimate playoff hopefuls, and that's important for both teams, because Detroit hasn't won their division since 1993 when the Bucs were in it, and it was the NFC Central. And the Buccaneers, while they've won 3 straight division titles, really did not have high national expectations coming into this. There were high expectations within the building, but not outside. And I'm not sure yet whether a 3-1 start has convinced those same pundits that the Bucs are a real contender, but beating the Lions and going to 4-1 certainly would.
Yes, and I'm so glad the game got flexed too, so that more people get to see the matchup and everything that we've done and all the orange and everything. So that's really exciting. And when you talk about the whole national expectations, I think a lot of people were saying that, hey, this is why they got such an early bye week, like getting some hate on here from the schedule, which the schedule's a complicated thing, but there was a lot of people that were like, man, this early bye week is going to be the worst. And I ended up feeling like it actually came at a pretty decent time when it comes to the health of players. That's always the biggest part of bye week, is can you get guys healthy? And you want it later because you just assume you're going to have more injury issues later, but it felt like just the perfect time for so many different people.
You generally want a later bye because more games, more wear and tear. But as it turned out, the Buccaneers had some significant injuries that would have probably impacted them in week 5. So the bye week, it's hard to say. In week 10,
we'll
we may
still
be feeling
want one
the same
then,
way, right? But it ended up being pretty beneficial. With a lot of players were dealing with injuries that weren't season-ending or even necessary to go on injured reserve, but could make you miss a game or two. So, like Devin White was talking about it, they asked him what he did during his bye week. He's like, well, I didn't do anything. I had to come in here every day and get MJ working on my foot. So he had a foot injury. He feels a lot better after that. He was a full participant in practice yesterday. Kalijah Cansey, trying to come back from the calf strain that's really bothered him for about 2 months. full participant in practice yesterday. Jamel Dean missed the last game, full participant. Mike Evans did not practice yesterday, but I think they're kind of just holding back on him till the end of the week because hamstrings are such a tricky thing. But still, only 2 players, Mike and then Luke Gedeke was limited, weren't full participants in practice, so I think it really worked out well.
I know a lot of the injuries had been on the defensive side of things.
True.
But of course, Mike Evans going down, huge part of the offense. And I think a lot of people, if they'd heard, that Mike would go out so early in the Saints game, you would start to really have some worries about what that was going to mean for the offense. And we just saw that how reassuring when such a dominant guy goes out that you have so many options for people, for Baker to look to, for the offense to look to overall, that it wasn't like suddenly there was no one to produce.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Trey Palmer touchdown. It was a trip package over to the left and Trey Palmer isolated by himself on the right side and just a simple give him a move off the line, throw the fade pass to the sideline. Who would we usually throw that ball to?
13, Mike Evans,
right.
ready, set, hut.
How many times have we seen that, right? But the fact that you could just stick Trey Palmer in that same role, and he's so good at that kind of contested catch, that really does make you feel better about that receiver depth. And then Devin Tompkins had his first touchdown on a really nice play where he made the diving catch. Cade Otton on the play that kind of took a while to materialize, and then the throw over the middle. We're looking now at the Devin Tompkins play. He didn't throw this ball until over 7 seconds after the snap, which is almost unheard of, which means there was a lot of good protection, but also Devin made himself open. Although, if you look at this throw from the back angle, he's not even open at the point that
was some predictive throwing there.
Threw it, but he knew he was going to get there.
That is, to me, even more impressive when it shows that there was a level of trust there.
Exactly.
And it's not one of your top 2 guys that typically a quarterback has that kind of predictive ability with, that they know they have that chemistry, they've done it so much that he can trust in that. For a guy who was on the practice squad a whole bunch last year, hasn't gotten that many reps in games always at wide receiver, to see that they have that kind of trust and chemistry is a really big deal.
Baker says that Devin Tompkins, he's 5'8", right? Maybe 5'7"?
We'll go with what he's listed at, sure.
He says he's never played with a receiver who's that size, who plays so much bigger than he is.
That's great. Yeah, that's so true. That's what they all say. His jumping radius, his catching radius, the way he plays. And we had him on our radio show last week, and he was really funny that we were talking about how all of his catches look so dramatic too. And we were asking him, like, do you know when it's happening? Do you realize it's going to look that way? And he's like, it's always, a lot of times it's backwards. He's like, I'll just think I just made a catch and then I'll go watch it. And I'm like,
whoa.
Wow. And he's like, other times I'm like, oh, that was going to look cool. And then I watch it back and I'm like, no.
That's interesting.
I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so now we were talking about those injuries on defense, but despite that, the Bucs defense has been just playing really great in terms of things like turnovers. And then also, I know the red zone defense has been incredible. We saw that especially with the Saints, of holding them to a lot of field goals and knowing how important that is, that as especially early in the season, offense, new coordinator, new quarterback, getting the handle on things, to have your defense holding them in the red zone and giving those opportunities is just a massive contributor.
Well, that's the reason why the Buccaneers have allowed 17 or fewer points in each of their 3 victories. They are averaging the touchdown percentage allowed on red zone drives against the Buccaneers is 27.3%, which is second best in the entire league to Baltimore. And potential 7s becoming 3s is the reason why the Buccaneers are clear at the end of the game. It's the reason why they have the winning margin. Think of that the New Orleans game, how it was an 8-point game with 4 minutes left. That would have been a 2-point game potentially, or a tie game if you couldn't keep them out of the end zone in the red zone. So the ability down there, especially the passing numbers against the Bucs defense in the red zone, are kind of crazy how bad they've been. So it's a really impressive part of the start for this defense and a big reason why we're 3-1.
That's great. And then a big part of, like you said, being 3-1, knowing that we're sitting atop the NFC South in a lot of ways, that looking at these divisions, it's so funny how everyone, again, with the national predictions ahead of the season, we're predicting that the NFC South was not going to be one of the, quote, stronger divisions, more competitive divisions.
You're being a little nice about it.
That's my job. I'd like to think that's my job. So I tried. But yes, people were disrespecting the NFC South a little bit. And man, I mean, I think that probably everyone out there is rethinking those predictions in terms of the overall look and strength of this division.
When you look at it, it's not unfair. The Buccaneers won this division last year with a sub-500 record. So for a national pundit to be looking and going, okay, this is a bad division.
And everybody has a new quarterback. You have no idea what that's going to look like.
Fair, but you have to readjust
now you're being
as
nice.
the season goes, right? Yeah. You have to adjust, and that's the way it happens in the NFL. There's worst to first teams in divisions every year, there's usually 5 or 6 teams in the playoffs that weren't in the playoffs the year before. It's what we forget at the beginning of every season. So you look at the NFC South before the season, most pundits would, and said, this division's wide open because nobody's good enough to win it. Well, I think this division is wide open because it has at least 3 pretty good teams. And it is the only division right now with 3 teams over 500. And I don't think anybody would have seen that coming.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out, especially when we've only played one division game at this point.
Right.
There is still a lot up in the air in terms of what this is going to end up shaking out to look like. So Antoine Winfield, I just feel like, especially after that Saints game, it's like we got to talk about this guy all the time so we can.
I will talk about Antoine every show.
Every show, which also, again, shameless plug, he is coming on the radio show with myself and Allie Marpet next week.
Okay.
And also, how perfect has he been for the Creamsicle stuff? He's got the amazing fro going on. And if you look at all of the videos we made to promote the new jerseys and everything, I was like, did we pay him to do this? This just worked out beautifully for us. I know that you heard from someone that we value their opinion a whole lot in terms of how we all have been raving about Antoine, but someone that could be called a bit of an expert has also been raving about him.
I have been, 2 straight summers I've predicted that Antoine would end the season as a first team Associated Press All-Pro, so I was kind of thinking, hey, I'm the biggest Antoine Winfield fan there is. I talked to Ronde Barber. I was watching his, that's the person you're talking about. I was watching his film session from the Saints game, and he broke down the play where Antoine broke up the pass in the end zone. And at that point, he said he may be the best safety in the entire NFL. And so I was doing something with Ronde earlier this week, and we started talking about Antoine after the shoot. And he's like, he doesn't necessarily get the high interception totals that all pros, usually there's some safety in the NFL who wins the season with 6 or 7 picks, right? Antoine might not get there, but he says no safety does more. He just does everything. Mm-hmm. He's around the line of scrimmage, he's getting sacks, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, tackles for loss, passes defense. I mean, if you look at the numbers on the Buccaneers defense, he looks like the most indispensable player we have because he leads the defense in just about every category. He's first in passes defense. Oh, there it is. He's first in tackles. He's first in forced fumbles and fumble recoveries. He's even tied for second in sacks. I mean, like Ronnie said, he just does it all.
He does everything. It's really incredible. I know I'm going to talk to him a little bit about this on the show Monday, but I've been asking some people some things about him in preparation for the show of, hey, what are some things that I should kind of know about him, or what are some interesting things we could talk about? And I was told that he practices so well. That when you talk about how, guys can't practice tackling, right? They were like, he still does without tackling. That they talked about how dedicated he is to, in the moment when you would be tackling, doing the right technique, the get low, the angle, that he's not just kind of lightly doing the I would have gotten you. Like, he is so detail oriented, every play, every practice, all the time, that just his preparation is incredible. And also, this is the personal anecdote part of it, he's the last one off the field, because I know this because every time I've needed to ask him something after practice, I'm like, he's the last one. That guy puts in so much work.
Takes his shoes off though, right?
And the shoes are off when he first comes out there. He warms up without shoes. He leaves without shoes. I'm very excited.
Feel the grass.
Feel the grass. I don't know. I'm going to definitely dive into that on Monday as well a little bit, which is going to be interesting. And also, we talked about the 2 first place teams part of the matchup on Sunday. There's also some first overall picks that will be matching up.
Yeah, you don't see this very often, although we kind of did a little bit in the Saints game because Jameis Winston got into that game. But this is Baker Mayfield, who was the first pick in the draft in 18, and then Jared Goff, who was first pick in the draft in 16, I believe. Both of them are not with the teams that drafted them, which means that first situation didn't go perfectly. There were some good times. I mean, like Baker had a great 2020 season for the Browns, but obviously if things had gone exactly as you'd hope when you take a quarterback first overall, you'd still be there 5 years later. But as Baker said, he was talking about how much he likes Jared Goff. He called him a stud yesterday. He says, this is coming from somebody who also needed a fresh start. And these guys have gotten a fresh start, and Goff's been doing it for 2 years now, but look at their numbers. They're very close to the same in their new situations. Goff has a little bit more yards per game because the Bucs have been emphasizing the run so much. Baker's been a little bit better at avoiding sacks, but otherwise these are pretty identical numbers, similar. And they're very good.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to watch. And we talked about how the bye week helped with health. We know the coaches also use it for what they always call self-scouting, specifically offensively, knowing, again, a new system, new quarterback. There was a lot of new stuff, new offensive line shuffled around. What does it seem like they really focused on during the bye week?
Well, I'd focus on the offensive side and Dave Canales, because he said before the bye, it wasn't really a question about the bye. It's like, what is this offense, how is it developing? He said, when we get to the bye, we'll have 4 games. We're going to take a deep dive into that tape, go through it all, and really see what's working, what's not working, what can we improve, what can we emphasize. And that's what I'm sure they did during the bye week. The coaches did get a little more time off, but unlike the players, they did come into the office for most of the week. So I'm sure they broke down all that film and saw what we're doing well. And what I think you and me can see now is sort of how this offense is developing. We didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but you can see there's a lot of play action. There's a lot of 2 tight end work. Look at this. Okay, so the Bucs rank 5th in the number of snaps under center. So a lot of it's coming from under center, which plays hand in hand with play action. Most play action that is effective is you take it under center, the quarterback turns his back to the defense, fakes the handoff, and then whatever. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of 2 tight ends, as I said, a lot. That's a huge jump from last year when it was closer to like 20%. And then what we haven't been doing nearly as much as we did before is putting guys in motion before the snap, which I would not have guessed. But we're kind of low on that. So it's more play action, two tight end stuff than. We still do that stuff, but not as much. The trips and put Chris Godwin. For instance, Chris Godwin is not going in motion nearly. It was almost every play last season, not nearly that much. So it's you're kind of seeing how the offense takes shape. Okay,
and then our final thing we will talk about today: the Bucs captains were announced, and really cool to see. I love when there is kind of a mixture of returning guys that it means they've been here, reliable a long time, and then also new guys who've sort of earned that spot. So here's a look at your captains. Offensively, you have Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Tristan Wirfs. Defensively, Antoine Winfield Jr., Devin White, Vita Vea, Levante David. I'm sure there are no surprises on that list whatsoever, but it was great to see guys like Antoine Winfield Jr. get it for the first time. And I'm sure, again, no one is questioning him earning that spot.
Godwin and Wirfs and Winfield were all first-time captains. Baker Mayfield, of course, is a first-time captain with the Buccaneers, but he has previously been that in Cleveland and Carolina. We talked a little bit with Antoine and Godwin about this honor, and they all were just they're obviously humbled and pleased that because this is done by a player vote.
Right, so that has to mean more to them than anything,
right. Yeah. And I think the key point here is it kind of confused people a little bit when Todd Bowles didn't name any captains to start the season, and then he would be asked every week, do you have captains yet? And he said the idea was, let's let this kind of the roster's kind of new in a lot of ways. Let's see how this develops and see who emerges as leaders. And that's exactly what Antoine said. He said it was a good process because we got into the season and saw who the real leaders were, and it was a better way to vote for those guys then. And I think, to take another example, Baker hadn't played a game for the Buccaneers. Would the players have voted him as a captain when he was brand new to the team and had never even played a game? On the other hand, your quarterback is usually one of your captains. Waiting 4 weeks in gave everybody a chance to see, we love this guy. Yep. He's awesome in the locker room. He's a leader. It's not just
a token thing because he's the quarterback.
Yeah, we are following him. He is a leader, and so he makes sense as a captain. So I think that was kind of cool the way that developed.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, that's going to do it for us on Buccaneers Insider, and we are just so excited for the Creamsicle game. Hope all of you guys are too. We'll be back next week to break it all down.